growing up, your entire schooling, your entire early career is all about being the one at the blackboard, right? You want to
Mhm.
be the one up there solving the equation, teaching everybody in the room, having the discovery. And when you become a people manager, you have to become and you have to voluntarily accept that you are not at the blackboard, you're in the back of the room asking questions.
Experience work interactions in a different and refreshing light. This is the Leader in You podcast, brought to you by EMC Leaders, taking care of the teams you care about, as well as the connected culture.
Hi, everyone. We are so excited to be here. Welcome to the Leader in You podcast. My name is Polina, and I am co-hosting this incredible podcast with the amazing Dr. Lola Gershfeld.
Thank you, Polina. So nice to be here with you.
And of course, we know that this is your favorite show, of course, because we are giving you all the tools you need to create the most thriving environment for the workplace. But we have a special guest today, and we have such a great topic that we're going to cover today. Everyone give a warm welcome to Matt. Yay, welcome, Matt.
Matt.
Hello, I'm so excited to have another conversation after we all met up at the ATD conference a little while back. This is great. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so if you guys watched our video with Matt, it was so good. We actually clipped parts of it and posted it as reels
It's great.
on our social media accounts as well because we loved the conversation so much. And this is what actually led us to this moment right here because we enjoy the conversation so much. We're like, Matt, you got to come to our podcast now because we want to hear more and we also want the opportunity to interview you and get some of the detail things that you like to share and you like to talk about. So let's get to it. Let's first start off. Let us know, who are you and what do you do in this amazing world?
Yeah, so Matt Gjersten, I'm the founder of a company called Better Everyday Studios, where our tagline is we turn great engineers into great managers. So it's all about helping people make that transition from individual contributor to people manager. My career started in the U.S. Air Force. I was a pilot for about a decade. No, actually was an instructor pilot, so I taught people how to fly planes kind of all over the world. Left active duty to join SpaceX, where I led the training and development team there for about 4 years. And then actually got recruited out of SpaceX to another company. And then here I am with Better Everyday Studios, where we work directly with organizations to build workshops and whole programs to help close various skill gaps that they see in their new and kind of early stage managers.
That's amazing. I actually took a couple lessons to get my private pilot's license because
Ooh, there you
I
go.
wanted to. My dad has his private pilot's license,
Yeah,
and
I was
Yeah.
just gonna say, my
so
husband Jack, he used to be a private pilot for Cirrus.
Yeah.
Do you know that plane,
Oh,
Cirrus
yes,
SR-22?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
And
Great.
you know
If
what?
I
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say if I ever get because one of my goals is to have my own plane, and Cirrus is high on the list because they have just some of the best safety features in their plane. So it's high on my list.
Well, I think the reason why we bought that Cirrus was because the whole plane you have a parachute and the whole plane is
Yes,
on the parachute. And I said, if I'm
exactly.
going to fly in that private plane, I have to be safe. So that was one of the
Yeah,
reasons why we got that. Uh-huh.
I was just like
excellent.
really
Yeah.
amazed that I had like one computer lesson, like one lesson on computer, and then the instructor was like, "All right, time to get in the plane."
Let's go. It's the ultimate learning in the flow of work kind of setup. You just get on out there.
And that's actually what we kind of do with the emotional process and understanding our emotions. We're not just, we want to teach you how to talk about emotions.
Yes.
No, we want you to take that process and we want you to fly. Just get in the plane, get to practicing right away so that we can have this, it's like that experience when I was in the air, and I'm terrified of
Yeah.
heights. So for
Yeah.
me, I was like, what am I doing here? But I love it so much. It's like that love-hate relationship. But I'm in there
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, you feel so much high. You don't even have to do
Yeah.
any other substances because you feel that high from flying. It's the same thing, we take this emotional process and we feel so alive inside after we're able to learn how to
Yeah.
communicate this way.
Yeah.
So I love that you have that experience and now you really get to take it into a completely different field. And
Yeah.
primarily, I know that there's a lot of women in that work in that industry in that workplace, but it is a male dominated field. Is that right?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely changing, but yeah, you'd be hard pressed to find a large engineering organization that doesn't probably have a majority of men running in various areas. Yeah.
And I bring that up because I feel like with the transformation, kind of like the awakening of
Mm.
using emotions in the workplace, we're just still so much at the forefront of this new movement. We are revolutionizing
Mm-hmm.
this
Mm-hmm.
movement. And so since
Mm-hmm.
we're at the forefront, it's just such a shift in, yeah, women are much more in society accepted to be emotionally responsive, to be open to communicating our emotions, to really understand how to engage in our emotional conversations. And we see that shift take place in men where we're still at the like, is it acceptable? Is it something that's really going to change us? Is it something that really takes an effect on us in a positive way? Like, especially stepping into a new leadership role. And I know that's what we're leading this podcast to is the topic of stepping into a new leadership role. So talk to us about, because that's something that you've transitioned, right? You've transitioned into doing this new company from such a completely different position that you had before. So share with us, how was it for you to transition into this different approach in your workplace? And yeah, how's that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think because I was never actually an engineer, but my undergrad degree was in physics. So I've spent, I've been in that world for a long time. And I'm writing a book right now that's all about helping specifically engineers make that transition to people managers. So I've been having a lot of conversations with them about what the challenge is. And it's really been resonating with me, even though I didn't, kind of have this language or code it this way in my brain. But it is just a hard transition because kind of as you said, like even outside of like the male female views of speaking about emotions, certainly just from an engineering point of view and technical fields point of view, it's just not in the space in the headspace, especially through the whole curriculum of as you're moving up. It's all about really digging into the tough technical problems that you're trying to solve, and the emotional side, the people side, just isn't even brought up. And so that's really what made me want to make this transition because as I was, working at SpaceX and then working with a lot of whether it was hardware engineers, software engineers, I deeply believe that we are on the verge of creating and building such an amazing new future. The kind of thing that we haven't seen in 50 years. If you go back to the first half of the 20th century, the transition that happened to lifestyles then is nothing like we've seen in the subsequent 70 years. And we're on the verge of that kind of thing now, where there's all these amazing inventions that are out there, all these amazing technologies that are out there. And in my opinion, having been in the midst of these organizations, it is that transition from individual contributor to people manager because we point to the best individual contributors. You're a great engineer. You've solved all these amazingly hard problems. So we're going to make you a manager. And we need to do that. We need highly technically competent people in leadership roles if we want these companies and technologies to succeed. But we also need them to have the skill set and the tools to handle the people side of things, to understand emotions, to be able to name their emotions, even, at a basic level. And if we don't give them that skill set, then that's where these organizations, no matter how great the technology, get into this kind of death spiral of they hire a bunch of people to have these great individual contributors get promoted to lead all of these new people as the company scales. But then the new people, because they're not being led well, they don't see the productivity that's expected. They don't have the engagement. A bunch of them start to leave. So they hire more people. It happens again. Then the new manager gets frustrated because they used to have all this fulfillment and they're not getting it today. And so then they leave. And it's just this spiral where the company has all this promise and it's just struggling, 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 not because of the technology, but because of the people side of things. So that's why I wanted to make this transition. And it's been incredibly it's exactly what I wanted it to be. Like I love working with these organizations. I get to work with just amazing clients every day, and I learn so much from them. I'm a nerd. I love learning about their technology, and then so many of them are really open to learning about this stuff. We just need to give it to them.
That's so awesome. And as you were talking about what exactly happens in teams and in leadership, I just got overwhelmed with like that whole cycle. I was like, whoa, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. That is exactly what happens. People just
yeah,
get overwhelmed, and then how can they think clearly, and how can they even like be creative engineers, and do
yeah,
the tasks that they need to do when they are so overwhelmed with everything. So I love the
yeah.
name of your business, Better
Oh,
Everyday.
thank you.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
just love that because, as incredibly amazing humans, we want to contribute to this world in a positive way. And I feel the way to do that is to become better every single
yeah,
day. And the
yeah,
direction to becoming better is to really learn ourselves in a level where we can communicate and connect with people in a better way. So I love
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I want
yeah.
to
I
say,
think.
as you were sharing, Matt, if I may, it reminded me of an engineering company I used to work with. It was, and it was interesting how before people become engineers, they're human beings. And it
Mhm.
feels like internal struggle that they have. They don't know the skills. They are very smart, so they can really resolve technical issues, but they're really struggling of recognizing what's going on with them, and they're so far removed from it. It's like it's very hard for them to even imagine that they are doing something wrong. No, it cannot be that they're doing something wrong. I'm smart. I'm competent. I can create all these products. Look at these, like Steve Jobs. Remember Steve Jobs? How
Yeah,
he thought of him. He was a genius, definitely. But it
yeah,
was interesting that when he wasn't able to communicate, he would shut himself down, and he would remove himself from everybody around him. And I remember reading a book about him and thinking to myself how lonely it gets for engineers when they do shut down, when they isolate themselves, and how stuck they feel, really, really stuck they feel, not knowing how to get out of that. Because once they remove themselves and close themselves in their office, now you have to come out, right? And
yeah,
and it's so hard. It's very
yeah,
embarrassing or shameful to even come out. And now it's very difficult. So I have seen this progression of the more shut down you become, the more isolated you feel, the more you feel like nobody gets you, and the more lonely you become, and then you longer shut down. You'll for a longer period. So
yeah.
that's really tough for engineers.
Yeah, and it really depends on when you learn some of those initial skills, I mean, because the longer you go in your career, kind of the higher the stakes become. And so if we can get to, in a perfect world, we're getting to these people when they're individual contributors or when they're brand new managers and talking to them about being open and being vulnerable and having honest conversations. And it doesn't mean you're weak and it's okay to not have the answer. Ideally, that's when we're doing it. But if we don't do it then and they become a senior manager and they become a director and now they're a VP, I think it's one of the challenges why it's interesting that so many organizations spend so much time and effort on executive coaching and upgrading their executive teams. Well, honestly, by the time somebody gets to an executive, it is really hard to get them to change. Their personality has so much momentum behind it. that's a really difficult thing. Whereas if, and that's why I often get asked about working with executives, and I've done it, and I've met with founding teams, and we've had great successes. But I really think the more bang for your buck is the earlier you can get people, the better, because they're just like sponges for information and trying new things because the stakes aren't that high yet.
Yeah. Yeah, actually that makes sense. I was just thinking about a training I did, like an onboarding training for this company, and it was like they had all the processes for procedures and such, but they had no process for dealing with conflicts, dealing with
Mm-hmm.
how to communicate when you're feeling stuck or you're struggling. And that is
Yeah.
like the core. This is what is so hard for me to understand is like that's the core of understanding how someone like what how does their clock tick, like how do
Mm-hmm.
they communicate, how, and then
Mm-hmm.
that really should be a signal as to the longevity of the employee, or the
Yeah.
engineer that can stay at the company. Like, can we teach him these skills and can he apply and integrate these skills in the process that we're using to cohesively work together as the team? And when you have that process, pretty much it's attainable for anyone and everyone open and willing to learn. So, from your
Yeah.
experience, Matt, what do you feel like is the most or has been the most challenging or emotionally challenging experience for you in the situations that you've seen and the engineers that you've worked with, and as they're transitioning into like a new management role or leadership role?
Yeah. Definitely the when I've asked this question to a lot of engineers and people who are now founders of companies and stuff, and what was the most difficult thing that they experienced and that they've seen, and it's definitely the difficult difficulty that I have as well. The first most important thing is delegation. It's
Mm.
that separating from you being the one to solve the problem to allowing others or helping others
Mm.
solve the problem. And so, from an emotional, because there's a really core emotional element to that of, I'd almost call it swallowing your pride. One engineer I talked to said it best. He said it's like your entire growing up, your entire schooling, your entire early career is all about being the one at the blackboard, right? You want to
Mm.
be the one up there solving the equation, teaching everybody in the room, having the discovery. And when you become a people manager, you have to become and you have to voluntarily accept that you are not at the blackboard, you're in the back of the room asking questions. Like that's the shift that you're supposed to make. And that's really emotionally challenging because everything you've been told to value, everything you've been told is going to make you exceptional in your career flips. And you have to set that aside. And it's kind of the ultimate, like, what got you here won't get you there situation. And one, we have to identify that that's happening, which isn't something that we do very often. And then two, we have to give, just like you say, we got to give people the language to talk about this stuff. Why don't you feel confident letting somebody else solve this problem? Why do you think you have to intervene? Why, they're doing all this great work. What's going on? And is it, often it's whether it's an uncertainty that they're going to be able to do the work, it's an insecurity in yourself. We need to give people the language to have those conversations.
Well, I'm going to let you speak, Mom, because I know that you probably want to say something with this, but it kind of just brought me back to like what we like to call like the hero story, right? So
Yeah.
a couple of years ago, we had fires here. I live in Maui, so we had a bunch of fires here, and it was like so interesting. Everybody just like wants to be the hero, like let me step up, but no one had, except for me, because I ran this like entire operation that went on, but they didn't have like the clear understanding of what they should be doing,
Hmm.
but they wanted to be the hero. And I feel like when we see that leadership transition into the management role, they're like, yes, I have like this greater role now, and I want to be the hero. I want to be at that board and directing people and, being the star. And yeah, this is such a good point. I think if we go down under what people seek and that
Yeah.
desire to be the
Yeah.
hero, it's like
Yeah.
really we want to feel valued, right? It's like
Yeah. 100%.
underneath wanting to be a hero is being valued.
Yeah.
how can I feel like I belong, that I'm so important to this community or to this organization, to this team, where I can be
Yeah.
the hero and feel valued? And what you said was so beautiful. Like it's really about shifting into how to create that value for the people on your team, right? So
Yeah.
you sit
Yeah.
back and you're playing like, in the background, you're leading a whole new team as a manager, but you're actually creating these opportunities for people to feel valued in the
Yeah.
workplace. And I think that the shift of still not understanding how that can create value for you is where maybe
Yeah.
like people
Yeah.
get the
Yes.
missing link, you know? What do you think, Mom?
Well, I think I think they have intention. As they become a new manager, they want to delegate. They have an intention to shift their place from the blackboard to the back seat by, wanting to be that manager. And what happens is the first time they do it, they don't like something or something happens to them.
Hmm.
There's a fear, right? There's a sense of fear that the person is not going to do what you want them to do. It's
Or
like, hey,
Hmm.
maybe, or maybe, wait, I want to add like expectations. Like, let's say that person is transitioning to a management role and they feel that there's expectations for them to fulfill the role. So then that fear comes in that if they don't fulfill those expectations the way that they know how in their mind, the only way they know how, then that's where they end up feeling like they've failed, right? Sorry, Mom, continue.
no, no, it's okay. Yeah. I think I remember doing this intervention with this team. The manager wanted this employee to do a project, and she gave her this new project. The employee never done this project, and every day the manager would say, "Oh, let me show you how to do this project," and every single day. And the employee says, like, I'm sick and tired of, like, why did she give me a project if she's going to come and tell me how to do the project? And every day she's asking, if I've done the project. And through the process of actually recognizing what's happening with the manager, what's triggering her, and
Yeah.
what's going on for her, she discovered herself that she was really fearful of the employee to fail this project, because if the
Mhm.
Hmm.
employee fails, that
Yeah.
means the manager is not effective, is incompetent, and
Hmm.
did not help enough the employee, or gave her the right skills to be successful. And
Hmm.
uh, through this work, they recognized that when she would give the ideas, the employee would shut down. And the more
Hmm.
the employee would shut down, the more the manager wanted to give her ideas.
Exactly. And
Yes.
that's where it's that self-reinforcing cycle that just gets worse and worse.
Yeah, exactly. So when they talked about what they needed and emotions they processed, like they really clarified, organized the emotions, they were able to connect at a different level, where the manager, said, I need to know that I'm valued, right? To your point, Palina, when you said the
Mhm.
manager needs to know, I need to know that I'm valued and I'm not failing. And the employee said, no, you're not valued. You are valued. You're not failing. I love working with you. I feel so overwhelmed when you bring me. I start to feel like you don't trust me. You don't value me. So when they were able to reassure each other, everything came down, right? So the
I
manager was able to give the freedom for the employee. Mhm.
Off of that, I wonder, I'd be really interested in your work of how often you also see this as a challenge of between the manager and their manager.
Oh,
Because
for sure.
because I've worked in a lot of, these organizations that are very technical and people really rise up the ranks quickly without a lot of people management skills. And so you might have directors and senior directors and stuff that are kind of in the same place in terms of what we're talking about here as a brand new manager. And so you will have even as someone's moving up the ranks as a people manager, the expectation that they're receiving, or at least they think they're receiving, is still to be that like that individual genius, or that person solving the problems. And so it's almost like, not, yes, the manager, the employee wants to be valued, but the manager needs to hear from their manager what the expectations are of them and how they're being valued so that they can make that shift as well.
I think we see that over and over again. If the manager feels valued and connected with their senior leadership, they
Yeah.
will create a lot safer environment and provide
Mm,
that same reassurance to the employee. Absolutely.
makes
It's
sense.
interesting. Like I know that I oftentimes relate back to my children, but the dynamic is so similar to like a parent-child dynamic, right? Or an oldest child to youngest child dynamic. So I have five kids and my oldest is almost 18, my youngest is 10. And I notice when my oldest is most connected with me, then he is so much more able to be
Mm,
responsive to his younger siblings. So I feel like
hmm
this is just exactly the same in an
hmm
organization when you
hmm
have, yeah, the leadership. And that's why we actually really like to work with the board directors or the executive teams, because
hmm
we know that's where it starts, right? We can work with the people, that are not in that position, but then the real shift and transformation happens in those leadership
Yeah.
positions.
Yeah.
So, what do you feel like? So, okay, if let's say you have a situation, can you give us a little bit of information on what does it look like to then identify and become aware of that shift that needs to take place that you talked about? Like when a person becomes a new management role and then they have to shift from like sending the whiteboard to sending the back. What does that look like in your perspective, in your process of how they make that shift?
I think the phrase that I always use that I think I've already used is it's about people, not problems. And so it's making a shift to make sure you're deliberately taking time to connect with people. That's the big problem that happens in a lot of organizations during one-on-ones, right? Like lots of organizations now have one-on-ones, maybe weekly one-on-ones, and that's amazing,
Yeah.
but they're spending all of their time going through the task list of how do we got this, do we have a blocker? And that is not what one-on-ones are meant to be for, right? One-on-ones are meant to be for how do we have development conversations? How do we improve our relationships and our trust in one another? And so, at a really simple level, like the first thing that we teach managers to do is to do icebreakers in their team meetings, right? Just like 5 minutes where you have one question that you all go around and talk about to talk about a non-work thing.
Mhm.
And you start off, if it's a new team or a low trust team, you start off super basic. What'd you do this weekend? What's something you're excited about next weekend? That kind of thing. You can shift into what's the last great book you read or last great movie you saw. Eventually, you get to what's a challenge that you're really struggling with right now? Or from if you look back at the last couple of weeks, like what's a failure that you're still trying to get over? And
Mhm.
what did you learn from it? And I focus on that because, my team at SpaceX, we were just I'm so proud of this team about how we had just like we were doing such a diverse set of things that we had diversity on every level, like on terms of people's backgrounds, people's ages, where they worked all over the country. And so there were a lot of interests were all over the place. There weren't a lot of commonalities necessary between a lot of the people, other than the fact that they worked at SpaceX. We all worked on the training team. And so we were doing this a lot where we were getting to know, we would be having these conversations to get to know one another as people instead of coworkers. And just by doing that, we had a couple people on the team who had a lot of friction. Their personalities didn't match up. And that personality mismatch meant that, every mistake that somebody else made, they saw that and they overlooked the things they did well, and that kind of situation. And just as we started having these icebreaker conversations, as we all got to know each other better, and you could tell people knew each other better because of the things they were openly sharing with the group, all of those personality conflicts, they just went away. We never had to have a formal process where we sat down and have a mediation and figure out what the root thing is. And I really think it is as soon as you can realize that the people sitting around the table with you are all people, just like you, and they're not just coworkers, all of a sudden you just expand the level of grace that you're willing to give them, the level of understanding that you have for the things that are going on. And so much friction just goes away, those things that get in the way. And so we focus on the problems and being more productive and getting more done, but all the research tells us that the way to achieve that is not to focus on the things, but to focus on the people and really get the people talking, get the people working together better. And then it just gets rid of all these distractions that then allow you to get more work done.
Well,
So it's
actually,
still, go
yeah,
ahead. Yeah,
no, I just want to add, like, it makes sense because as soon as you start to ask people personal questions, then they feel like you care about them, that they're
exactly.
important to you, and I think
Exactly.
that our brain, and, my mom, of course, she taught me this and she says it so well, but our brain, when we talk to it in a way where the answer to the question is yes, and that question is, are we important? Do we matter? Are we, do they have our back? Do they care about us? If those answers are a resounding yes to those questions, then that makes us feel part of something greater, something
Hmm.
more
Hmm.
valuable to us. And I think people go to work and maybe subconsciously, maybe they don't necessarily recognize it at the moment, but when questions are only work related, they think that that purpose, right, is to just in the benefit of the company, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, well, if we can just benefit the company, then that's all I'm here for. But then when you make that shift and it's like, well, actually, I want to get to know, like, have you played pickleball before? Which I
Yeah.
haven't. What kind of ice cream do you like?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? Have you been to
Yeah.
Hawaii? Like,
Yeah.
do you have kids? I mean,
Yeah.
all of these questions, like both of you started smiling right away. Yeah, because it's the truth. We start to feel cared for, important, and valued in that small little moment. So that
Yeah.
message gets clearly corrected in that
Yeah.
shift. So that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly
Good
right.
stuff.
Exactly right.
Do you want to add anything, Mom?
Well, I'm just thinking, I think all of the things you said correct. And it's interesting. We did a survey, an assessment in this company. There were like 30 people. And Matt, you were talking about the one-on-ones and how the manager should really get to know the employee or the team members. And it was interesting that we assessed emotional safety within the team, between like colleagues, within team members, and then direct employees with their direct manager. And their connection and their safety was higher with the manager than with the team members. And it made sense
Mm.
because
Hmm.
they had more one-on-ones with their manager than with the team
Yeah.
members, right? And
Yeah.
so it's interesting that they actually had more conflicts with team members than with
Yeah.
managers. So this is
Yeah.
very important, I think, for managers to recognize is their job is not only be connected with their direct reports, but the manager
Yeah.
also need to learn how do I connect team members with each other,
Yeah. Exactly.
because this is really important for their support and for their collaboration and for their engagement. So it's interesting. Polina was saying about the siblings, right? When the oldest sibling is connected to you, Polina, you said that he's much more responsive to all the siblings. Team members are like siblings.
Yeah.
They have that same need for connection and for
Yeah.
relationship. So I think managers need to also pay attention to that as well.
Very true. I mean, there's the stat. I forget if it's from Gallup. I think it comes from Gallup of, people who answer the question positively. I have a best friend at work, and just the implications that that has, answering that question positively has on their likelihood to stay at a company, their productivity at the company, the engagement they feel with the company. It's really, really important that you have that sense of community. We're tribal creatures, right? Like that's what we do, and we feel safe when we are part of a tribe. And so your team is that, your company can be that. There's lots of different ways, but yeah, it's the manager's job to help make that connection happen.
So, how to tell us just briefly about how what you do helps people reconnect if they're struggling or if they're stuck or they feel like, and because from our podcast we did at the ATD conference, we have a specific process that we use that kind of helps guide people because we see people get really lost and overwhelmed with the amount of
Yeah.
emotions, things that go on. So like what take us through what it typically looks like
Yeah.
to, work through something that's difficult in the team or a manager.
Yeah, and so I think one of the biggest differences between us is typically it's almost like a train the trainer capacity in some ways in the respect of what we're talking about here, because I'm working with managers to give them just a couple tools to help go back to their team and start connecting with them. And so this concept of having these icebreakers, we'll spend 2 hours just talking about that idea of
Mm,
why it's important, what it is, all the challenges that can come up with it. Because the interesting thing about it is it can sound easy on the surface, but every person on their team is going to react differently when you ask those questions. And there's certain people from certain cultures that attempts to get to know them personally are seen as like unprofessional. Like, how dare
yes.
you ask me these questions? And the
Yeah.
truth is that, trying to build trust too quickly will damage trust just as much as trying to build it too slowly or not trying to build it at all. If you move in too fast. And so it's all about that process of starting with kind of that fundamental understanding. We go through a lot of since we have engineering mindset, we focus on a lot of the research stuff from Google, Google's Project Oxygen, Project Aristotle, work from Amy Edmondson on how much of the research points to this personal connection and trust being important, just to like cognitively connect with it. And then in the session, we do a number of exercises where we let them kind of do some of these icebreakers between them so that they can understand it, talk about if any of them have done it on their own teams. And then we have a big discussion where we unpack, okay, why is this going to go wrong? What are
Mm,
the reasons why people aren't going to engage? What are the things that people,
mm,
what are the concerns that people are going to have? And then we basically say, okay, well, go try it now. Here's a list of one or two questions that you want to try next week or the week after. Talk to your team about why you want to do it and go try it. And then we
mm.
always try to make sure that our programs that we run with teams have at least two workshops. So we'll do one workshop where we'll cover this all. We'll send them out to do some stuff, and then we come back and we kind of debrief on, okay, how did it go? What would you do differently? How would you change this? And then maybe we give them one more skill. So really for us, it's about because we're primarily focusing on new managers or managers that are receiving manager training for the very first time, the main thing that I think about is how do we lower the bar of expectations for that first action, for that first thing that you're going to do? How do we make it as simple as possible? Because that's what I've seen is, makes it most likely to succeed.
Well, it sounds like we need to band together because we, we can really bridge the struggles that people go through at the start and do the icebreakers to ease them in. And then when they feel like they get stuck in those
Yeah.
not responsive people who are maybe
Yeah.
responding to those icebreakers or not really understanding the importance or the value of them, we can bring in that emotional piece and that
I
process.
love it.
Like, all right, well, let's get like really juicy here,
Yeah.
and try and figure out what's underneath, what's stopping you, what's blocking you. So it's like a full circle leadership
I love it. Where you got like the
leadership
first
skill.
pass where you get the low hanging fruit and then the
Yes,
difficult conversation.
exactly.
I love the idea of if we just have a partnership where I take the easy ones and I just hand you the difficult cases. Like let's definitely do
Oh
that.
my gosh, I know. But we like it. We like it because we simplify it, right? I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
emotions are confusing and overwhelming and can be very challenging and can be
Yeah.
difficult to dissect and understand. And as we were talking about we were at a webinar earlier teaching about how to navigate difficult conversations. And I was saying, like, we're like investigators, We want
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
investigate so that everyone can learn about themselves, right? Like the purpose of life
Hmm.
is to know thyself, to learn about
Hmm.
yourself so you
Hmm.
can show up in your most authentic self in
Yeah.
everything you do in work
Yeah.
environment, out of work environment, in personal relationships. And I feel like this is the biggest challenge people have in their life is being their most authentic self.
Yeah.
So how can we take and bring it together so that people
Yeah.
really feel like, I'm free. Finally, I can
And
be myself and I can participate in my icebreakers. I really want to answer that question, but I just feel so trapped inside. You
and
know?
and I think that this complexity that you bring up is one of the challenges specifically for the people that I work with, because in engineering and in scientific fields, it's all about you know the formula is the same for everyone. Physics doesn't change. Materials engineering doesn't change. It's like you learn the tool, you apply it to a situation, and it works. And there's just so many different variations of people, permutations of people that
Yeah.
you have to there's no one answer. And I think that's another challenge is you have to be flexible. You have to yeah, really be interested in it and realize that one question or one phrase or one thing that you say or do will be taken in very different ways depending on who you're talking to.
And we actually take that and we say, if they don't have the ability to be interested, we want to understand what is underneath that.
Hmm.
So that's
Hmm.
why I love this like really layered process where you guys can come in and offer those tools. It's so funny to me and probably for you too, Matt and Mom. It's like we're such naturally personable, caring people. Like for me, I would not think to not ask a personal question with someone that I have on my team because I'm interested in general, like what does that person, how does that person, what lights them up? But we're just missing so much of that in the workplace
It,
environment.
It's interesting. This is because the reason why I love what I do is because this is a really big transition that I've had to make over the last 15 to 20 years of my career. And I was not that person. I didn't care what you did after
Yeah,
work.
there
Like
you go.
I wanted to do the work. Like really, when I was at the Air Force Academy, um, and even when I was a pilot too, early in my career, I remember I was just like, man, all I want to do, what I want to do when I grow up is I just want to be in like the basement of the Pentagon doing research by myself, like writing briefs of like this, like that are going to like change strategic policy. Like I just wanted to like live in that like research science and then even as I went through things, I was very much just like, I want to come into work, I want to do my work, and then I want to get out of here. If I'm not doing work, I want to be with my family, like just like cut and dry,
Mhm.
let's go. And so it was a process for me to even understand just how important that is. And how, because I think different people have, I'm sure you see this a lot, different levels of kind of being able to disassociate themselves from their emotions or what's happening, and maybe it was something that came out of the military. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, probably what it was of, you go to boot camp or you go to survival training and you're in all these situations that just are not fun. You do not
Yeah,
want to be in
they're
at
very
all.
traumatic, is actually
And
what, right?
yeah, and it doesn't matter. Like the
Mm.
whole thing is like you still doesn't matter. You got to get the mission done. And so I, kind of have, probably developed a skill set to kind of disassociate how I was feeling with what I needed to be doing. And that's not a skill set that most people have. It's not a skill set that maybe most people should have. And so that was even a journey for myself.
Yeah,
So
no,
we
thank you
we
for
are coming
sharing.
to the end.
Yeah,
I think, Paulina, I just want to maybe ask Matt to share how can people contact you, get in touch with
yeah.
you? Tell them about your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so there's several layers. Definitely go to find me on LinkedIn, Matt Gjersten on LinkedIn. I'm on
And
there
we'll
a
put the
lot.
link in the description as well.
Amazing. Thank you. And
Mhm.
then our website is bettereverydaystudios.com. And then, yeah, as you said, we did the Leadership Launchpad together. So it's a weekly podcast where I talk with people like yourself. I talk with a lot of frontline leaders themselves who have made this transition themselves. And we just focus on, doing exactly what we're doing here, 30-minute, pretty casual conversations about the challenges that leaders are facing and how they can overcome them.
Wonderful. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, for all of you who are watching or listening, we appreciate you. We're so grateful for you. And, we love this stuff. So thank you
So
again.
great.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Dr.
Matt.
Lola.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much. It was
Thank
very
you
nice,
both.
nice having you here.
Yeah. And we will see
Absolutely.
you
I
next
feel
week.
like we could have this conversation for a long time.
Yes,
Forever.
we could definitely talk for a long
Forever.
time. Yeah.
There's so many more questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's so
But
many
we'll
more
end for now. We'll continue. We'll
to be
Okay.
plan
continued.
another session.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you,
Thank you,
Lola.
guys.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. It's a joy to share these podcasts with you. Be sure to check out our previous podcasts and subscribe to join us at our next podcast of The Leader in You, brought to you by EMC Leaders, taking care of the teams you care about. Until then, be well and be focused on your relationships. We'll see you soon.